with issues debate, and gather your ideas on how we might collectively shape the ways in which the collaborative works on this issue with respect to our core mission, and in terms of research, education, and innovation related to accelerating the implementation of menus of change principles. So with that, I'm very excited to turn the floor over to the University of North Texas team. It's spearheaded by Danny Armitage, along with Dr. Priscilla Connors and Chef Matthew Ward. I'll let them take the floor and go ahead and share their screens. So I've stopped my screen share, and just you'll see that on the timing, we've got till 12:20 for this presentation. If there's time for any questions, please send those in the chat. So over to you, and thank you so much.
Okay, hey, first of all, let me know when you get my screen to jump in there. I see it.
You're good to go.
I'm good, great. So yes, this has been a topic for a period of time that we've been looking at. I want to thank Priscilla and Matt and Peter from Dining that have helped us start to think through some of this. What we're going to do is go over a little bit of an agenda today that's going to take a look at how do we define it. And what I think you're going to find is that the food insecurity definitions are still all over the place. We're going to look at how we apply them to MCURC principles. We're going to talk about this relationship with affordability, best practices, educational practices. And I also want to frame this a little bit in the way of saying, in this new coronavirus world, what we're also taking a look at is there are many other new pressures that are pushing against us in this construct of affordability and how we're going to make this work. So what we would like to do as we started looking at this is looking at all of the definitions, and Priscilla's going to help us walk through some of the definitions on of how people are looking at food insecurity. I want everybody to know that some of these we're looking at, some of the information is not necessarily just focused on college students, but in order to wrap your head around what the broader scope of the world is looking at with food insecurity, I think we need to take a look at doing that. So Priscilla, I'm going to turn it over to you. And since you and I are in opposite ends of the world in Denton, let me know when you're ready to change the slide.
Thank you. Hi, this is Priscilla Connors. I'm a professor at the University of North Texas, and we have been looking at the definition of food insecurity. Are you guys able to hear me?
Yep, we can hear you very well.
Okay, good. Okay, I started out with the USDA definition of it. I see that used quite broadly, and here I'll quickly read through it. Food insecurity as a household, economic, and social condition of limited or uncertain access to adequate foods. In addition, the USDA categorizes food security as high food security, marginal food security, low food security without hunger, and very low food security with hunger. And I have a note on the bottom there. I was very interested in knowing, just a minute, let me see if I'm picking up I was very interested in knowing what the US Census was defining as food insecure. And you see across the bottom, what's a household? A household is all people living within one housing unit. Unrelated roommates, as far as the US Census is concerned, are those people who share a living space and are in fact a household. I found that very interesting. Okay, next slide. I just thought I would share some of the traditional USDA household indicators of food insecurity, because in looking at the literature and speaking with food banks, etc., it seems to be some of these things are picked up and some of them aren't. And I thought I'd very quickly go through them so that you can see the gamut of food insecurity. Worried food would run out. Food bought, but it didn't last. Couldn't afford a balanced meal. Cut, skipped meals. Cut, skipped meals for over 3 months. Ate less than I felt I should. I'm hungry, but I didn't eat. I lost weight. I did not eat for the whole day. I did not eat for the whole day for over the last 3 months. Now, I'm not going to go piecemeal through the chart on the right, but I just want to say that it differentiates between the different categories of low food insecurity and very low. I just wanted to point that out, that on the very bottom, the gold bars, you're starting to see the gold bars with ate less than I felt I should, hungry but did not eat, lost weight, did not eat whole day, did not eat whole day for 3 or more months. And those are the very low food security, or what we traditionally would have called food insecure. Okay, next page, please. How are we going to define it on campus? Well, Martine described food insecurity among college students as a lack of socially acceptable ways to access safe, nutritionally adequate foods. And I think an important part of this definition is socially acceptable ways. Henry defined it as a reduced caloric intake, lack of access to healthy food, lack of dietary variety, hunger without eating, reduced weight due to not consuming enough calories. In her 2017 study, students discussed it as constantly searching, worrying, wondering about food. Next slide, please. Some of the characteristics of food insecure students. Food insecure freshmen as compared to secure at a Southwest university. Here are some of the characteristics that you'll typically see. Higher incidence of depression, less likely to eat breakfast, more likely to have unhealthy off-campus eating, less likely to get food from parents, an interesting facet. Strategies they used: ate cheaper, less nutritious food, skipped meals, prioritize thinking about what's my next meal of getting my work done for school. That's unfortunate. Another one that I think is very interesting is the very last one: avoided social events where money is needed for food. And I think this really abridges the whole campus experience, and part of the reason that students are in school is to network with colleagues and other students, and that's a really unfortunate side effect of food insecurity. Next screen, please. What makes food affordable for a college student? Food affordability is the cost of a safe, nutritious diet relative to available funds. An affordable eating pattern is one where it's financially possible to make healthy food choices that meet the dietary guidelines and reduce risk of obesity and disease. Listed below are the major factors that you're probably familiar with that are going to impact food affordability for college students. It has to be accessible, available, and most importantly, the cost has to match their available funds. Next, please. Is campus food insecurity structural? Food insecure undergraduates are not on the fringe. They're actually a diverse group of students. They're on our campuses, and they are challenged with meeting their needs. At the same time, they're trying to be successful in higher education. Some report a whole day going without food, others skip meals, eating less, cutting portions. That theme keeps coming through. On-campus food insecurity is complex. It's related to a lack of money to purchase foods, and it can be structural. And the question I ask is, what structural issues are we positioned to address? Next, please. And this is just a very quick overlook of our principles of healthy, sustainable meals. And I'd like to go on to the next slide, please. I propose the principle 9, designing healthy and sustainability into operations and dining services, is the principle that we should pursue when we are looking at alleviating food insecurity on our campuses. Why principle 9? Access to safe, nutritious food is a fundamental tenet of health and quality of life. The World Health Organization links nutrition to good health and human development. So, what campus factors contribute to food insecurity? What can we do about them? This is key. What are the assumptions that we have been making about how students interact with our dining services and other campus venues? And what can we do in a positive way to use those pieces to reduce the incident of food insecurity among our students? Thank you. Turning it back over to Danny Armitage.
Thanks, Priscilla. So one last little jump into reports of food insecurity. A 2015 report of food insecurity among college students. Urban institutions found 11.2% attending 4 years, 13.5% attending vocational schools. Another piece that I think in the second bullet point is that this demographic of food insecurity is really still all over the place. This report followed up that said that students under the age of 20, which is predominantly those people that we're dealing with in our residence dining communities, were less likely to face food insecurity, while those students 30 years old and older were more likely to be hungry. And so we got to take a look at this as still breaking it down in some way of saying, who are the individuals that we're really trying to address here? Other aspects of it, and one of the things that is very important, is that now we're starting to look at comparing food insecurity with this concept of homelessness. And in all actuality, some of the reports that we've recently read, couch surfing is now starting to appear in the literature regarding homelessness. And what does it really mean when we talk about couch surfing? So let's say, have we looked at the best practices? And I think it's really interesting that if we look at what most campuses are starting to do to address the food insecurity, none of them have really started looking at pulling up and saying, but how do we get the sustainable, nutritious meal program out there at an affordability cost, which Priscilla had talked about, is a critical component of addressing these needs. The food pantry doesn't necessarily do that from a dining perspective. The meal swipe donation program is somewhat limiting, but it is an access of allowing people who say they're insecure to get access to a free meal. Are there reduced cost meal programs? At UNT, of our 5 residential dining facilities, we have one that we have defined as the door cost of eating there is about 35% lower than the other 4 dining, so that people do know that if they are low on funds, there is an affordable option there. We've also looked at reduced waste programs with the hope that we can actually pull up and reduce those costs and pass those savings on to students. And then we're also looking at many of our financial management centers, our student money management centers on campus are starting to get in and work with students in a very tangible way of how to manage their money, frame their money, and what should take place there. Next piece that I really want to challenge MCURC to look at is this affordability. And dining operations on most college campuses are faced with this construct of how do we increase our check average? How do we increase our revenues? How do we pay a greater tax back to our institution to help support what the institution is doing, and so forth? MCURC, while Priscilla has identified the one principle as truly connecting to affordability, the language really isn't in there. And so what we really might need to do is really have a group take a look at how we put the affordability piece in. We're sustainable, we're healthy, but we really haven't addressed the piece of, but what do we do for that low socioeconomic student that may not have the resources to eat that meal? And then food insecurities and how students take a look at this from an affordability. Housing is number one, keep the roof over their heads. Other bills often are very important, tuition and fees. And so the lower ones that are actually put into place there, students, the 18, 19, 20-year-old are thinking of, I can put off food first or participate in social events rather than looking at this. And maybe what we should do from a research perspective is look at you know, some of the studies show that most students who are, quote, food insecure look to buy large bulk quantity of programs from Walmart, Kroger, Aldi's, even, you know, Dollar General.
Yeah.
They buy cheap food in bulk. They have concerns for food quality and the healthy aspects of what they're buying, and that there are other barriers to some communities on time transportation and proper refrigeration for purchasing in bulk. So, where should MCURC and members focus? Long-term problem or stopgap measures are needed. Can the student actually afford food after all bills are paid? If the student cannot do that, are we adding to the increased student debt load? What is the appropriate responsible financial steps that should be taken? Student has short-term financial challenge that needs a stopgap solution. A scenario is I have a car accident, my car breaks down, $1,000 to get it repaired. I'm now for a 4-week period of time looking at being food insecure, but then my resources will catch me up. And then the other piece is the student debt. And then how do we manage affordability? How do we develop a low-cost, nutritious plan that meets the goals of MCURC? And then how do we meet that in terms of the demands for a net return to the institution and managing our donation programs? So next steps, study the pricing affordability between buying groceries and affordable sustainable meal plans. What are the real costs for that, and how do we communicate that to an 18, 19, 20-year-old or to the 30-year-old that may be looking at how they meet their needs? Define the relationship between traditional resident student meal plans, commuter meal plans, and the age demographic with which MCURC principles really has been applying to. And then continue to explore purchasing options to reduce costs and manage that check average to get us into a better position. And with that, Priscilla and I will ask for questions, comments, or angry exhortations about what we've just discussed.
No, thank you so much, Danny. I'm actually going to move us along, but ask that folks kind of keep track of questions and comments for the breakout session. We are, I'll show you now actually, if you can stop sharing your screen, I can share mine and show the agenda. That was such a valuable set of recommendations, setting the stage there with what food insecurity is, and then also really offering some great connections to MOC principals. You know, this is a task force that Danny and senior university administrators started to really bring forward along with academics, going back, you know, well before and into the October meeting. But I think we clearly know that now more than ever, this topic is very relevant and worthy of our attention. So thank you so much for that stage setting. This is the agenda for the rest of the session. We're going to do a quick popcorn presentation round where we're going to hear from 3 different MCURC leaders who are addressing food insecurity in their communities. And so it's not only that food insecurity on campus, but in the surrounding areas. And then look at food insecurity from a sustainability perspective. Marcus Carson, sustainability leader at Duke, is going to speak about the other side of this, of course, which is food waste. And then we're going to fling you out into breakout session where we really want you to help us address that question of how might MCURC start to dig into this and address it. So with that, I am pleased to turn it over to Maureen Timmons for a quick 3-minute share out on the really cool work she's doing with the Women's Lunch Place and as part of a new task force in her area with several other MCURC leaders. Maureen?
Thanks, Sophie. I'm very happy to be here today, and thank you for that great presentation. It's really touched on. So the Women's Lunch Place is located in Boston. It's a day shelter that offers quite a few wraparound services. I call them hub services, but the one that we'll focus on today is the dining component. So if you've been in Boston, there's Newbury Street is our fanciest street in Boston, and you kind of walk down into the basement of a church, and there's the Women's Lunch Place. The first time I went for a tour, oh my God, head exploded. It's beautiful, it's welcoming, it's warm, it oozes with hospitality. And I thought, okay, you know, we could partner with this group. So it's probably been 2 or 3 years now. Northeastern donates on a regular basis. Our team at the dining services is fully integrated with the Women's Lunch Place team. I personally volunteer there usually about twice a month, which has been an interesting experience. We donate china when we can. So we are fully integrated with this group. I've been talking with the chef there for probably years because, you know, if you know me for any length of time, I'm eventually going to talk to you about menus of change and MCURC. So very early on, we were in the kitchen, I'm blah, 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 menus of change. And she said, and I said, you know, what do you think about maybe integrating it here at the Women's Lunch Place, serving, you know, women and children in need? And she said, you know, maybe. And last fall, we were teaching, Professor Christopher Basso and myself, our executive chef and nutritionist, were teaching a course on experiential food literacy, which focused on the menus of change principles. So we invited her to come and be a part of that and sort of learn a little bit more about the principles. She attended some of the classes, and then we chatted again in the spring. She joined us there. Since then, we've been working with them to figure out how to integrate the menus of change principles into their menus. I'm going to give you a little prop. So they had a big event on Monday. Their largest fundraiser is called Eat Lunch Give, and the props that they handed out was, this is the invitation. They included a menus of change magnet. They did a bowl, a grain bowl, focused on the menus of change principles, and a kale stem pesto to think about that food waste component. That was the kale stem pesto was given to us by our friends at Boston College. Shout out to Frank Bailey if he's on the call. So menus of change has been fully integrated. So in addition to that, they're doing a gap analysis. They're doing a little bit by themselves. I'm working with them a little bit. We have some students I've brought down to volunteer, so our students are getting engaged in understanding that food insecurity piece, you know, beyond what they see in the dining halls, but seeing the menus of change principles coming for everyone, not just elite, you know, institutions, but everyone could be part of menus of change. And also we had this semester, we had a group of students in one of the food systems classes, did a project with them about how to integrate menus of change into the Women's Lunch Place. So we're kind of hitting that with every single angle, and it's just really exciting to see all the different applications that menus of change can have outside of our universities. And it's been a really powerful experience. And the people that are engaged there are just excited about what's coming next.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you, Maureen. It's super inspiring that you, even pre-crisis, were bringing the menus of change principles out to this really transformative organization, and hopefully, I think, planting some seeds of inspiration for others out in the communities now. And we'll come back at later if we have time and hear more about that task force. Now I'm excited to turn it to Charlie Haas, one of our fabulous fellows from Stanford, for a really groundbreaking initiative that she's part of. Charlie?
Hey everybody, it's an honor to be here with everyone. Yeah, I'll jump right in. I'm a sophomore Stanford undergraduate and a Menus of Change University Research Collaborative Fellow. I see some familiar faces from the MCURC conference back in Boulder last year, but lots of new faces as well who I hope to get to know. So jumping right in, my co-founder and I, Isabel Foster, who's a Stanford public policy graduate and was recently recalled from her Fulbright, we have jumped full-time, over full-time, into the SNAP Action Initiative. So what is this? SNAP stands for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Many of you, I'm sure, are intimately aware of how broad this program is and how broad it is on college campuses in particular. 1 in 9 Americans rely on SNAP, and that is a number from before COVID. This number is skyrocketing. 67% of those SNAP recipients are children or in families with children, and 34% are elderly or disabled, or have family members who are elderly or disabled. And I'm gonna focus in on this last statistic here, that 34%, because in the age of coronavirus, many of us love to take advantage of safer access options for groceries. You know, we want to take advantage of pickup. We want to take advantage of online delivery. If you are on SNAP, those benefits, those safe access options are largely unavailable to you because your benefits are stored on an electronics benefits transfer card. Because that doesn't work like a credit or debit card, it is almost impossible for you to take advantage of curbside delivery or curbside pickup or online delivery. And that is the niche our initiative has plugged into. So more specifically, or I guess broadly, Our mission is to ensure that every American has safe access to healthy, affordable food. And more specifically, this looks like empowering the expansion of the SNAP online purchase pilot to all 50 states. It's currently only available in 20, and to all small grocers and even farmers markets. Currently, it's pretty much just Amazon and Walmart. And our work comprises several specific action areas. That top one is a map of every food stamp accepting retailer in San Mateo County, and it's gonna go bigger. I'm just gonna pop that link right into the chat if anybody would like to play around with it. We're facilitating a partnership between DoorDash and Grow NYC, which is transporting emergency food boxes from Union Square to individuals' homes. We're distributing a retailer survey to retailers to figure out their thoughts and questions and concerns about the SNAP online purchase pilot, working with Code for America to process their Get CalFresh enrollment data, and gaining testimonials for the Food Donation Improvement Act. And that was a lot, but we'd love to discuss further and list anybody on this call on our partners list, and specifically explore the intersection of college student hunger with the broader landscape of SNAP. And finally, if you'd like to chat, we really look forward to talking with you in the breakout groups, or just shoot us a cold email and we would love to learn more.
Thank you so much, Charlie. You are making us so proud and so amazing the progress that you've already made. Please do get in touch with her, the email address there. We can include contact information with everything that we send out afterward. And our third speaker in our popcorn round is Dr. Amit Sharma, researcher at Penn State, who will tell us about a really important survey he's working on. Amit?
Hi, Sophie. Thank you. And hello, everyone. We, as Sophie said, that we also wanted to start working on looking at this aspect of food insecurity, as was defined earlier in the presentations, and food access and food insecurity. Sophie, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So our objective is to try and gather as much evidence as we can in the United States, as well as around the globe. And so between my colleagues and I, so we created a task force that includes 5 universities at the moment in the United States: France, Canada, Brazil, India, and we have a few more joining in. And so we've created our instrument, the survey instrument. We've already collected about 500 observations in the United States. We're moving towards increasing that as much as we can. These are nationally representative samples. So we are now into phase 2, where we have done 3 rounds or 3 waves of data collection. And we do have some preliminary results where we've shared in another instance. So the next slide, please. The outcome, I think one other tab, please. Thank you. So what's the anticipated outcomes? I'll actually start with number 3. This information, if we can provide information, a little bit of descriptive information on issues related to food access and security, to local action groups, policymakers, and also fuel future research as to what happened, what are some of the causes, and what are some of the outcomes. I think that's our primary purpose. We're also working with Penn State Outreach in Philadelphia to see if we can get some granular data. Obviously, we're going to create a publicly accessible database and eventually, hopefully, some publications. Next slide, please. So in the next step, we are going to start collecting data internationally. As I said, a couple of partners are already getting the ethics approval, so that'll be the next step. And obviously here in the US, as you can imagine, as the earlier presentations have said, this is a very diverse phenomena. And so if there's any way we can get more participation that can contribute to broadening this database, that's really our main ask, as Sophie was saying. One more click, please, a couple, yeah. So that's really where we are at the moment. If anyone wants to be part of the study, we'd love to have you on board.
Thank you so much. And I'm sensing some connections already with some folks who've presented thus far and joining forces. So thank you so much for sharing that really exciting work that each of you is doing, and just how rapidly you've mobilized is incredibly inspiring, and I think has applications in higher education and beyond, and is such a phenomenal use of each of your smarts and aspirations and passion for healthy, sustainable food for all. Speaking of sustainable, we are now going to move to food insecurity from a sustainability perspective. So I'm really pleased that Marcus Carson from Duke, who heads up sustainability initiatives there, has agreed to share some of his thoughts. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand it over to Marcus.
Great, thank you, Sophie. All right, so clicking share, there we go. So yeah, my name is Marcus Carson. I am the Assistant Director for Sustainability and Quality Control at Duke Dining, and we'll talk about food insecurity from a sustainability perspective. So first, a couple of caveats is I want to be clear that I don't have this figured out. And just to reiterate, seriously, it's a huge puzzle that I am still very much trying to navigate, and Duke is trying to navigate as a university. And so my goal today is to kind of present a framework for us to think about food insecurity and to provide a space where we can be comfortable saying, I don't have a solution yet. So often we're sharing best practices. We always want to have a signal or give a sense that we have it figured out. And I am giving you permission to say you don't know and that you need help. So from there, my agenda for today is to first look at why sustainability can be a useful framework for thinking about food insecurity. How we can apply that framework to food insecurity, looking at a specific application around food recovery, go briefly into what we're doing at Duke, and then talk about moving forward. So to dive right in, so why is sustainability a useful framework for thinking about food insecurity? Like sustainability, food insecurity is difficult to observe. It can be uncomfortable to confront. It's complicated. It's often seen as expensive, and it's very often seen as something extra. And so I think you could use all of these descriptors for a sustainability program. If you've talked to your sustainability staff member, I'm sure they would agree with me here. So, food insecurity faces a lot of similar challenges in this realm. So thinking about how sustainability can, the framework for sustainability can be applied to food insecurity. First, I'm sure that this is a very familiar framework to many of you. I'm not going to go too deeply into it, but this is the three legs of the stool, the triple bottom line, the diagram that is very often used to depict what makes something truly sustainable. And that's that it's socially responsible, equitable from an economic standpoint, and environmentally responsible. And so the way I have started to think about this when it comes to food insecurity is to kind of break down this framework. So first, instead of thinking about instead of thinking about economic sustainability, thinking about how the food we're providing is affordable. Instead of social sustainability, how the food we're providing is nutritious. And instead of environmental, think about how the food that we're providing is responsibly sourced and responsibly managed. And when I say responsibly managed, I really mean in the work that we're doing, are we being solution oriented? Are we thinking about who we're providing our services for and how we're doing that? And I was very pleasantly surprised to see that I think this aligns pretty nicely with what Daniel, and Priscilla were presenting on in their presentation. So applying this framework to the idea of food recovery, I think this is probably one of the best, easiest ways to think about sustainability and food insecurity together. You have leftover food that you can then pass on to food insecure members of your community instead of having that food go to waste. It can be a pretty nicely closed loop system here. But there are many hurdles, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. How do we make sure we have the labor to do that? How can we make sure that we're providing a consistent source of food? There's a lot of expectations created when you say that you can donate extra food. What are the bureaucracies and regulations that get in the way of that? What are the transaction costs? So while it may not cost extra you're not purchasing more food, there are costs related to labor, there are costs related to packaging, that kind of thing. How do you set pricing? Is it free? Is it just reduced? How do you establish access? How are you communicating how the food is donated and then offered to those in need? And then how do you identify the folks that are in need of this donated food? So it quickly becomes very complicated, like with any sustainability issue, that there's no clear-cut solution. And so in that sense, and similar to sustainability, when you have these really complicated problems, the most important solution is solid leadership. And I know this can be a deeply unsatisfying solution to kind of throw out there, because I think we all want some sort of magic bullet, some sort of technological fix, some sort of magic way of thinking about these problems that suddenly makes it all line up and make sense and make it really easy to tackle. But at the end of the day, like with so many sustainability issues, it comes down to having that leadership that can be that brave in tackling these really complicated and hard and wicked problems. So then talking about what we're doing at Duke, just to kind of give you a really quick introduction, we have a unique system at Duke. So instead of being entirely self-operated or entirely managed, we have 33 locations altogether. 3 of those are self-operated directly by Duke University employees. One of those facilities is an all-you-care-to-eat facility. And then the balance, the 30 other locations, are contracted retail units. And so many of those dining retail locations are mom and pop shops. They either have, they only have a dining location on campus. They may have one in the community. And we have a few national brands on campus. Some other important things to talk about when we're talking about how we're tackling food insecurity at Duke is that we are a private university. Our undergraduate students are required to live on campus. They have to apply to live off campus, so very few undergraduate students do end up living off campus. And if you are an undergraduate student who lives on campus, you are required to have a meal plan. So obviously that plays a really big role into the prevalence of food insecurity among our undergraduate population. That said, at Duke, we have more graduate and professional students than we do undergraduate students. So we have about 6,500 undergraduate students, and we have 9,100 graduate and professional students. So that kind of just gives you a sense of the landscape that we're working in at Duke. So some specific programs that we offer at Duke, and I think this aligns with some of the recommendations that Daniel and Priscilla were offering, is all 33 of our dining locations have what we call a $5 daily devil deal. This is a $5 meal or less that we have had our dietitian look at to make sure that it is a full and complete meal. Obviously, it is going to be smaller portions, but we do have, there is a more affordable, a more accessible meal option at every single one of our locations, and we call those our daily devil deals. Those are really popular with students who are interested in sustainability because the portions are smaller, and so there can be less post-consumer food waste, and it's also really important among our food insecure students. We have just started working with our graduate and professional student council's community pantry. So that is a relationship that is just now beginning. Unfortunately, it's in the current COVID-19 environment, but hopefully that is something that can grow and become productive in the fall. And in this past spring, which is crazy to think about because it feels like it's been a year since January, we had a food insecurity symposium on campus with UNC Chapel Hill and North Carolina State University, where there was a leadership roundtable that is beginning to address the issue of food insecurity as a region, as a larger problem. And this was really important because it was hosted by our VP of Student Affairs and the Dean of the Graduate School. So this gets back to what I was talking about with the importance of leadership. Having those two individuals stand up and say that this is a problem on campus, we recognize it as a problem on campus, and we're willing to invest the resources to do something about it, makes a huge difference. Last spring, we conducted a food insecurity survey among our graduate and professional students. We learned through that survey that 5.09% of our graduate and professional students identify as sometimes not having enough to eat, and 1.56% identify as often not having enough to eat. So those are the kind of the baseline data points that we're working with at Duke. And just being able to go out and collect this data was a pretty big undertaking, but it's really important to figure out the scope of the problem before we can start addressing the problem. So moving forward, just a couple of quick ideas that I want to introduce to the group is thinking about this need for an institutional change. Again, echoing what Daniel and Priscilla were saying, is we can provide stopgap solutions, but we need to make sure that we are taking in the full picture. And again, that is very much in sustainability's wheelhouse, thinking from a systems thinking perspective. And a way that we're doing that at Duke is that we have begun asking ourselves who was our institution, who was Duke historically designed to serve, and who are we trying to serve today? And that can seem like a pretty basic question, but when you introduce it to a room full of college, higher education professionals who have been working at the university for sometimes decades, it can be, it can inspire a lot of really important conversation around how we are serving our students, and who our students are, because they are not who they were decades ago. And so just to close, I want to bring us back to this idea of why food insecurity, why sustainability can be used as a useful framework to address food insecurity, is that these are the obstacles that we're facing when we think about those issues. And so with that, I will stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Sophie.
Thank you so much, Marcus. I really appreciate that nuanced perspective and the humility in saying, we don't have all the answers, but these are some questions to ask and some really brilliant, I think, ways of reframing. I saw Danny Armitage nodding his head a number of times. And I just want to also echo what you said about the power of leadership, because I think the fact that, Daniel Armitage in a position of assistant vice president at his university, being vocal about these issues, the fact that in MCURC it's our senior university administrators, chaired by Dr. Everett. These are the folks who are saying at that highest level, this is an important topic and can be really galvanizing. But so really just want to applaud the whole effort of the task force pre-pandemic and now going forward, and then also Marcus, some of the questions that you've given us to chew on. So I really appreciate all the insights that each of our speakers has shared. We're now going to invite you to turn on your video if you are willing. We're going to fling you into breakout sessions for 10 minutes. And what we ask is to address, the question's not on here, but the question is, what do you believe? The question is, I'll type it into the chat. It's given these ideas and others that you've gathered in your own work, what do you think should be the role of MCURC in addressing food insecurity, whether on campus, in your community, or beyond? So I'll go ahead and share that in the chat. It'll be sent to you as well. Shannon is going to set you all out, and not required to be on video, but it does help. Some folks who didn't want to participate in the breakout are thinning out, but now we'll have a good robust set of folks we will see you back here in about 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
Hi, Shannon. I can't hear you. I was alone in my room, so I came back.
Yeah, I assigned you to another room, but then you came back.
It's okay. With
The
my
issue is I set up, the number of breakout rooms, but then a lot of people got off the call before the breakout rooms, so then it was uneven. So
don't
that's
worry.
an
I don't need to go back
issue.
because I have my kids around, and it would be difficult anyway. So
Okay. No problem. Sorry, I need to time this. Hi, did someone just join the 530 number?
Yep, this is Caesar.
Hi,
I'm
Caesar.
actually in the meeting. Hi, I was in the meeting already, and I'm in room 11, but my desktop is not letting me access my microphone today.
Oh no. Okay, let me see if I can add you to.
You can add me to, I think it was 11.
Yeah, let me see. Hold on. Okay, I'm adding you right now.
Oh, maybe we buggered out too soon. There we go. Well, we only have 2 minutes left, so.
It automatically kicks you out when I close the rooms, but hopefully you guys had a great discussion.
We did. I don't know how we're
Good.
going to present it all in 120 seconds, but yeah.
All right, folks, we're trickling back in. I hope that was valuable. Once again, I just wanted to ask to share. If you didn't assign a scribe, if you could just send Shannon smunts@stanford.edu. Would love to see what you came up with. What ideas do you have? And as this idea hopefully kind of stays in your mind, Danny, Priscilla, the UNT team, our popcorn presentations, Marcus gave a lot of different dimensions of this, right? Research, sustainability, food service, beyond our campuses. And this is really just the beginning of the conversation, but we really appreciate all of you taking the time today. Eric, wanted to give you a chance to give any closing comments before we bid everyone farewell.
Yeah, just great to see everyone. Thank you so much for participating. We had a really great turnout. Thank you very much to Sophie for putting this together and to all our great speakers today. Excellent job. It was a real pleasure to see everyone.
Great. Well, thanks again. And we will share the slides, the video, and the little kind of any links that were shared. If you haven't had a chance yet, that map that Charlie's put together is so amazing. So definitely recommend digging into that and participating in a Meet survey if you can, and staying well. You, your families, your communities, you are part of our broader family and community, and we wish you all the best. So take care again, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, Sue Christopher.
Hugs. Hi, Lillian. Good to see you, Lillian.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.